Georgia in 2026 can't be summed up in a single headline. It's more like a quiet fault line widening beneath suburbs once considered guaranteed winners. Not long ago, Metro Atlanta felt almost untouchable. Residents poured in, investors chased the same zip codes, and builders moved so fast homes barely had time to settle. Sellers assumed the list price was just a starting point. Now, that momentum is slowing. Redfin shows slight year-over-year price drops and longer market times. Zillow reports declining home values, and Realtor.com notes rising inventory. Beyond numbers, the real change is psychological. Coverage from WSB-TV and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution highlighted that 7 in 10 homes sold below asking in 2025. Buyers are learning patience works. This isn't a crash. It's about where pressure appears first, price cuts becoming normal, days on market stretching, and sellers needing to compete again. Let's count them down. Number 10. Woodstock. Woodstock's rise was built on a promise that felt almost unshakable. A picture-perfect downtown, a commute people were willing to tolerate, and a lifestyle that seemed to justify the trade-off. The neighborhoods projected something solid and dependable, like stability you could literally buy. For a long stretch, Woodstock rode a powerful wave. Families were searching for more room to breathe. Buyers who couldn't afford homes closer to the city looked outward, and plenty of newcomers picked Cherokee County as their suburban step-up. That combination created serious momentum. But here's the risk in 2026. Woodstock is what you'd call a momentum suburb. It expanded quickly, and rapid growth works like a rocket booster. It accelerates things on the way up, but it adds serious weight on the descent. When affordability tightens and the pool of qualified buyers shrinks, the first areas to feel that strain are the ones fueled by excitement and urgency. A lot of people purchased out of fear of missing out. Investors jumped in assuming the next buyer would pay even more. Once that urgency cools off, though, Woodstock shifts into something slower. Homes that used to vanish in a matter of days now linger long enough to lose their shine. Sellers who once expected bidding wars are met with uncomfortable quiet. Buyers, on the other hand, become more particular because they suddenly have leverage and time. And in real estate, time is the one thing sellers never want working against them. Woodstock also sits squarely in what you could call the middle-tier pressure zone. It's not the bargain option, but it's not an elite enclave where higher monthly payments barely register. Mid-range buyers are the most sensitive to changes in payment. And in 2026, payment sensitivity is steering the market. The shift doesn't show up as a headline-grabbing crash. It creeps in gradually, more like erosion than explosion. One modest price reduction turns into another. Seller concessions quietly reappear. Closing costs start getting covered again, and the moment one homeowner gives in, the pricing ceiling for the neighborhood adjusts downward. Every new listing after that has to compete with the new benchmark, not the rosy expectations of last year. Number 9. Smyrna. Smyrna has long been sold as the ideal middle ground. It's close enough to Atlanta to stay plugged into the city's energy, yet far enough out to offer that quieter suburban feel. Add in its proximity to major job corridors, and for years, demand there held up even when other areas started to cool. What made Smyrna feel insulated was its balance. It delivered location without the full price tag of living in the city. That positioning gave it a kind of built-in protection. But in 2026, that cushion is thinning. Smyrna is feeling pressure from both directions. On one end, you have buyers who, during the frenzy, would have zeroed in on Smyrna without hesitation. Now, though, the monthly payment feels uncomfortably high, almost like carrying a second rent. With mortgage rates hovering around 6%, even small differences in price translate into noticeable jumps in payment. And as national coverage has pointed out, when affordability disappears, demand can stall faster than most sellers expect. On the flip side, Smyrna is no longer competing in isolation. If it stops feeling like a smart value, buyers quickly start comparing alternatives. Other parts of Cobb County, other perimeter neighborhoods, other communities where their money stretches further. That shift is critical. The moment buyers begin cross-shopping aggressively, Smyrna turns into a comparison market. And in a comparison-driven market, being slightly overpriced isn't a harmless miscalculation. It can mean months of inactivity. The structure of Smyrna's housing stock amplifies that effect. Older homes that need cosmetic updates or full renovations are the first to feel resistance because buyers are now factoring in repair costs upfront. Townhome-heavy areas reprice even faster since comparable sales are easy to spot and units sit side by side competing directly. Meanwhile, newer homes purchased near peak pricing become what you might call trapped listings. Owners can't cut much without taking a loss, so they hesitate and the property lingers. This is how strain develops without a dramatic crash headline. A seller enters the market anchored to last year's confidence. The listing doesn't move. A price reduction follows, then another. Gradually, offers below asking stop feeling bold and start feeling standard. When several similar homes in the same pocket begin adjusting their prices within weeks of each other, the narrative shifts. Smyrna stops being defined by its location advantages and starts being defined by its terms. Number 8. Kennesaw. Over the years, Kennesaw evolved into more than just a place on the map. It became a brand. People associated it with attainable family living, larger houses, newer subdivisions, and a steady stream of buyers who wanted Cobb County without paying top dollar for the most exclusive school districts. That dependable flow of demand gave the area a sense of security. But 2026 is revealing a more complicated reality. Kennesaw sits directly on the affordability fault line, and that makes it especially sensitive when borrowing costs climb, or even when they simply remain elevated. Payment shock tends to hit this segment first. Luxury buyers often have financial flexibility. Entry-level buyers search aggressively for true bargains. The middle tier, though, feels boxed in, too pricey to qualify as affordable, yet not exclusive enough to be shielded from market pressure. Data from Redfin in its Atlanta market snapshot shows homes taking longer to sell and overall transactions trailing last year's pace. That lines up with the broader pattern. Buyers are moving carefully and thinking twice. And in communities like Kennesaw, where purchasing decisions are closely tied to strict family budgets and firm monthly payment limits, that caution hits hard. There's another layer to this. Kennesaw has a significant amount of similar housing inventory. In a fast-moving market, that sameness doesn't hurt much. In a slower one, it becomes a liability. When buyers can scroll through 5 nearly identical homes in the same neighborhood within minutes, the overpriced listing stands out immediately. It doesn't blend in. It becomes the example everyone points to when negotiating. Once a home starts sitting longer than expected, perception shifts. Buyers assume there must be an issue, even when there isn't. That's how momentum fades. Sellers begin trimming prices not out of preference, but because time applies pressure. Appraisals grow stricter. Inspection reports regain influence. Repair, requests, and closing concessions re-enter the conversation. The sharpest strain often lands on recent buyers who don't have much equity cushion. Their listings might appear ordinary at first glance, but the repeated price adjustments tell a different story. They can't afford to misjudge the market for very long. Number 7. Cumming. Cumming stands out as one of the clearest case studies of how rapid expansion can eventually turn into risk. Located in Forsyth County, the area became a magnet for families chasing more space, strong schools, and freshly built neighborhoods. Demand poured in, and prices climbed right alongside it. For a while, Cumming felt unstoppable, like a rocket lifting off without resistance. But even rockets burn through fuel. In 2026, the shift is straightforward but powerful. Buyers are no longer operating from desperation, and when urgency fades, a market has to stand on value rather than momentum. Cumming's surge was driven by a widespread belief that North Atlanta's outer suburbs would just keep appreciating indefinitely. That confidence encouraged stretched budgets and aggressive bidding. Many households accepted long commutes, convincing themselves that future equity gains would justify the trade-off. Now, though, buyers are crunching numbers instead of chasing hype. And once decisions become math-based, Cumming's vulnerability becomes clear, because the monthly payment is what truly determines affordability. There's another layer here. The area is packed with newer subdivisions purchased during peak optimism. On the surface, newer homes look like the safest segment of the market. In a cooling environment, however, they can become surprisingly exposed. Sellers who bought brand new at top dollar don't have much room to maneuver. Cutting the price often means locking in a loss, so they hesitate and try to hold firm. The result? Listings linger. And when homes linger, that becomes the narrative. A property that sits too long shifts neighborhood psychology. Buyers start asking themselves, why hurry? Sellers begin wondering, did I miss the top? That mental shift alone can slow a market. The substitution effect adds more pressure. Buyers willing to live that far from the city typically widen their search when prices feel high. They compare Cumming with other fast-growing exurbs and expand their radius until the payment aligns with their comfort zone. That's how value gets reestablished, not through dramatic headlines, but through buyers quietly declining to overpay. Keep an eye on new construction incentives nearby. Builders can offer rate buydowns or closing credits to lower a buyer's monthly payment while keeping the official price intact. Number 6. Marietta. In Metro Atlanta real estate conversations, Marietta almost functions like a comfort word. It brings to mind established neighborhoods, dependable demand drivers, and a reputation that has survived multiple housing cycles. That long-standing credibility is precisely why any shift there tends to catch people off guard. Markets that are labeled safe don't collapse overnight, but they also don't adjust quickly. They resist reality first, then recalibrate gradually. There's a common belief that stable suburbs are immune to downturns. They're not immune, they're just slower to respond. They hold firm for a while and then, almost quietly, they realign. In 2026, that realignment pressure is building because buyer behavior has changed. Data from Redfin shows that Atlanta area homes are taking longer to sell compared with last year, and overall closings are down. That combination points to a market where buyers are no longer rushed, and when buyers have time, time becomes leverage. With more breathing room, they scrutinize every listing. Anything that feels even slightly overpriced gets filtered out or aggressively negotiated down. Marietta's diverse housing mix intensifies this divide. Fully renovated, move-in-ready homes can still attract attention. Average condition properties tend to linger. Older homes needing meaningful updates feel the most resistance because today's buyers are factoring in real renovation costs. During the boom, imperfections were overlooked in the rush to secure a deal. In 2026, those same imperfections become bargaining tools. The real tension in Marietta shows up in expectations. Sellers are often anchored to peak comparable sales and price their homes as if the frenzy never ended. Buyers, on the other hand, are anchored to monthly payment reality. They respond cautiously. They request closing credits. They negotiate inspection repairs with more intensity. And if a seller refuses to adjust, buyers are increasingly willing to walk away, confident that another option will surface. The pressure usually surfaces first in the middle tier, not in luxury, not at the bargain level, but right in between. That's where affordability constraints hit hardest, and where the buyer pool starts shrinking first. Once that group pulls back, inventory accumulates. Sellers reduce prices just to stand out. Buyers begin to treat discounts and concessions as standard rather than exceptional. Number 5. Roswell. Roswell doesn't just market houses, it sells a mood. Think tree-lined streets, preserved historic character, and that understated sense of affluence that doesn't need to show off. It's the suburb people picture when they imagine leaving the city behind but holding on to the lifestyle they love. And that's exactly where the vulnerability shows up in 2026. When a market trades heavily on emotion, it can drift away from the math. During the boom, buyers weren't just purchasing square footage, they were buying into a vision. They paid premiums for charm, for location, and for the fear-driven belief that this opportunity might disappear forever. That emotional pricing pushed values higher than fundamentals alone might justify. And when buyers return to a more rational mindset, emotional premiums are usually the first thing to unravel. This year, Roswell is dealing with a buyer who still appreciates the area but won't ignore the numbers. If the monthly payment or overall value feels off, they're more willing to walk away. Broader Atlanta trends, showing softer pricing and slower transaction volume, support that shift in behavior. When the pace slows, scrutiny increases. Details that once went unnoticed suddenly matter. The age of the roof, foundation concerns, aging kitchens, awkward layouts, or the true cost of modernizing an older property. Roswell has a significant inventory of established homes, and in a cooling market, Properties that need updates often require meaningful discounts unless they've been fully renovated. That's where the pressure line forms, along renovation quality. Homes that are beautifully updated can still draw interest, but even those face firmer negotiation. Properties needing work tend to sit longer, prompting price reductions. Each reduction quietly resets comparable sales, nudging the broader market downward without any dramatic headline. Roswell also operates within a competitive ring of nearby high-demand suburbs. Buyers frequently cross-shop with Alpharetta, Johns Creek, Milton, and Sandy Springs. If Roswell's pricing creeps too close to the most elite neighbors, buyers face a choice: stretch into the prestige tier or pivot to a more affordable alternative. In a market with increased inventory and longer selling timelines, that pivot becomes easier. Number 4. Sandy Springs. Sandy Springs carries a different vibe than most suburbs. It blends corporate office corridors, dense residential pockets, luxury enclaves, condo towers, townhome communities, and traditional single-family streets, all within the same zip code. That mix has long made it feel resilient. The logic was simple: if one segment cooled off, another would pick up the slack. In 2026, though, that same diversity is turning into a pressure point. Different property types react to market shifts at different speeds. The segments that move fastest, usually condos and townhomes, tend to set the tone. In attached housing, comparable sales are easy to track. When inventory piles up in a building or complex, price cuts become highly visible. And once reductions are visible, perception changes. In real estate, perception can move just as quickly as data. Sandy Springs also sits in what you could call a comparison corridor. Buyers measure it directly against the city of Atlanta. If price gaps narrow, some buyers decide to move closer into the city. Others, prioritizing space for the same monthly payment, push farther out. That leaves Sandy Springs in the middle, forced to justify its convenience premium at a time when buyers are laser-focused on monthly cost. Recent local reporting has highlighted rising inventory across metro Atlanta alongside softening prices. That combination gives buyers both options and patience. And patience changes behavior. Decisions take longer. Negotiations get tougher. In Sandy Springs, buyers are running the numbers carefully. They factor in condo association fees. They scrutinize HOA dues. They estimate renovation budgets. They weigh whether the location premium truly makes sense compared to nearby alternatives. Here's how the strain shows up: longer days on market, listings that expire and return, multiple price reductions stacked in the history, and sellers offering closing credits to keep transactions alive. Because so many properties are similar, a single price adjustment can quickly reset expectations for an entire building or neighborhood pocket. Number 3. Johns Creek. Johns Creek stands as one of Georgia's most sought-after suburban names. It carries a reputation for top-tier schools, manicured neighborhoods, and a polished identity that gives buyers confidence when they're committing serious money. That's exactly why any signs of strain here matter. When a market is built on brand strength, part of the price is tied to perception, and perception-based premiums can weaken when affordability tightens. Many buyers targeting Johns Creek are stretching their budgets to get in. Not all, but a significant number. They're paying not just for the house itself, but for what the name represents. In a red-hot market, that premium rarely gets questioned. In a cooler one, buyers start evaluating the trade-off more carefully. They ask what they're truly receiving for the price, and whether that added cost still makes sense when monthly payments feel heavier. Broader metro Atlanta indicators show softer pricing and slower transaction activity, which means even strong suburbs are operating within a shifting system. One of the biggest behavioral changes is that negotiation has become standard again. Reports highlighted by outlets like WSB-TV and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, citing data from Redfin, showed that nearly 7 out of 10 metro Atlanta homes in 2025 sold below their original asking price. That kind of statistic reshapes habits. Buyers learned something simple: don't accept the first number. That shift is particularly challenging for premium suburbs because their pricing structure depends heavily on urgency. If buyers believe patience leads to discounts, they slow down. They negotiate more assertively. They ask for credits and concessions, and listings start getting evaluated with sharper scrutiny. Turnkey, Flawless homes can still move. Average condition properties linger. Outdated homes feel the pressure quickly. The divide between pristine and merely acceptable widens. Johns Creek also competes directly with neighboring prestige communities like Alpharetta and Milton. Buyers constantly compare across those lines. That means Johns Creek isn't just defending its pricing against the broader market. It's defending it against peers. If a buyer can stretch slightly and move up the ladder, or save a bit and shift laterally, the premium attached to Johns Creek gets reevaluated. Number 2. Alpharetta. Alpharetta has long been considered one of Metro Atlanta's crown jewels. Its proximity to tech hubs, carefully curated lifestyle branding, and the sense that buying here was buying into the future all combined to make it feel untouchable. During the boom, Alpharetta became more than a suburb. It became a symbol. And symbols have a way of overshooting because buyers stop purchasing homes and start purchasing narratives. In 2026, cracks are appearing because three pressures are colliding at once. The first is affordability. Price points in Alpharetta demand strong incomes, solid savings, or considerable equity. Even buyers who are well qualified feel the pinch when mortgage rates hover around 6%. National reporting has shown that pending sales can stall when affordability fails to keep pace with market expectations, and Alpharetta is not immune. The second factor is expectations. Sellers grew accustomed to a market that rewarded almost any listing. Now, the market is grading homes more rigorously. Overpriced properties sit. Homes with repair needs lose momentum. And obvious flaws are negotiated down, sometimes heavily. The third force is competition. Rapid growth has created more neighborhoods and more comparable listings. When buyers have options, they stop feeling rushed. Longer selling timelines across Atlanta support this behavioral shift. Once buyers slow, Alpharetta's premium must justify itself with tangible value rather than confidence or hype. The segment most exposed is homes purchased at the peak of optimism. These are newer homes with little buffer. Sellers here have limited flexibility. They can't cut much without taking a loss. But the market increasingly demands price adjustments to move inventory. That's where the cracks become tangible. Sellers are caught between what they owe and what buyers are willing to pay. Alpharetta's narrative once felt unstoppable. In 2026, it's measurable. Days on market stretch, price reductions become more frequent, and concessions quietly reappear in deals. Number 1. Milton. Milton is the suburb most people assume is untouchable. Prestige, sprawling lots, gated communities, modern estates, and an aura of wealth all combine to give it the sense of being insulated from ordinary market pressure. That's exactly why any cracks here feel so striking. The cracks matter because Milton sits at the very top of the housing pyramid. When the top wavers, everything beneath it feels the ripple. Prestige suburbs aren't immune to cycles. They're just slower to acknowledge them. And when they finally do, repricing can be swift because the buyer pool is small and the stakes are enormous. Every Milton listing is unique, costly, and time-intensive to transact. Even in healthy markets, a slow-moving luxury home can linger, and in a cooling environment, time becomes the enemy. The longer a listing sits, the more it invites negotiation. Buyers start assuming there's a hidden problem. Sellers grow anxious. Agents push for reductions. Eventually, the market wins. Not because sellers want to, but because they have no choice. Broader Atlanta indicators already show slower activity and softening values, and Milton is fully part of that reality, just at a higher dollar scale. Even a small percentage adjustment translates to a huge sum in absolute dollars. Those adjustments are what reset the psychology of prestige. When one high-end Milton property closes below expectations, it becomes a reference point. Appraisers note it. Buyers reference it. Sellers can no longer ignore it. There's another subtle 2026 risk. Luxury buyers are selective and widely comparative. If Milton stops feeling like a smart value relative to other high-end options, buyers either pivot elsewhere or simply wait. Waiting, in this market, has become a powerful tool. Across the region, buyers are learning patience, and patience rewrites the rules.